Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Gerald here with someone.
I'm Caroline.
Offthegridneedlearts.
What's your name again?
Ginger Gerald Stitcher. So the teacher is here checking in.
Checking in to see how you're doing.
Really bad at the moment because I'm talking.
Uh-oh. Now you are working on dishcloth number
2.
2.
I started last night during the closing ceremonies of the Olympics.
Ta-da!
Here it is.
Look at that.
Whoop, just lost my stitches.
Now I should tell everybody I was admiring Gerald's tension because it's a lot more even. His second dishcloth, his stitches look a lot neater and tidier than his first one. So you can see that is really great progress. He's also got a couple of really small holes in the first one, a couple of tiny mistakes. But that's okay. That was, it's practice, right? And this is why we're making dishcloths and not sweaters yet. Sweaters are coming.
So according to, because I had asked Caroline before, all these little lines on my first dishcloth are most likely tension changes.
It could be, it could also show where your progress was. Do you know what I mean?
So like I sat it down for 12 or 24 hours and then came back to it. So it stretched out a little bit.
No, not that it's stretched out, but that maybe, when you came back to it, you weren't holding your yarn at exactly the same feel that you were when you put it down. But that's why when you're making garments or, knitting other projects, especially with wool, that's why we wash them when they're done and we block them. Because that tends to even out all of those stitches and it makes them lie a lot better. It evens them all out. So the magic of blocking. But we'll talk about blocking after we've done the hat. So speaking of the hat, I have a supplies list for you. Do you want to hear it?
Sure.
Do you want me to talk, just say it now?
And then might well, because you didn't tell me all the supplies from the last thing.
Yes, Gerald, I forgot to tell you that you would need a darning needle. Forgive me for thinking that a cross stitcher might have a few extra needles in his house.
Not that big of a needle.
Pardon me. All right, so you're going to need, and I may have doubled the amount that I told you originally for this. So you need a 100-gram ball of worsted weight yarn. Now, Louise says we only need 1 ball. I thought we needed 2. So 100 grams. I know you don't talk grams. So I think that's about 250.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We can talk grams when it comes to that.
Right, good. Okay, so one ball of worsted weight yarn. You need a 16-inch circular needle, right? Which you've already got because that's what we did the hat on. And you're going to want it in a 5mm or a 4.5. Now here's where things.
So that would be a 7 or an 8.
Yes, a US 7 or a US 8. The US 8 is the 5mm, and the 4.5 is the US 7. If your tension on the dishcloth was really loose and you didn't like the fabric that you got with the 5mm, then you're going to want to do your hat with a 4.5. If your dishcloth was perfect and you loved it with a 5mm, chances are pretty good that you're going to like your hat with the 5mm. So that's a really good clue.
What if we didn't do the hat or the dishcloth with the 5mm?
Did you do it with 4.5?
Yeah.
Well, then that's going to be good for your hat too.
Okay.
Okay. And we're going to do a little lesson on gauge next Friday. I'm not sure, I might not post it until Saturday because I actually have to record it with Louise and Adrienne, but we're going to talk all about gauge. Louise is going to actually teach us a lesson on gauge. And that'll be good. Okay. So the other thing that you're going to need is a stitch marker. Now, if you do not know what that is, we'll talk about that a little bit later. If you don't have one, you can use a paper clip in a pinch. The other thing that you'll need is a tape measure. Do you have a tape measure?
I do have a tape measure.
Thumbs up. And that's it. And a darning needle.
Oh, I have one of those now.
Oh, wait, I forgot something really important. I knew it. You need DPNs, double pointed needles. So you need the circular needle, the 16-inch circular needle, and then you need one set of DPNs in the same size.
I know, that's going to throw me off.
What?
So that's going to throw me off because my DPNs are 8s.
Then you'll need 4.5s.
Yeah.
Sorry. Just remember that these
we don't need those till the end, right?
You will use them again. You'll use them in sweaters.
Yeah, but I mean, we won't need them until the end of the hat.
Oh, yeah. You won't. The double pointed needles are used at the very end where you're decreasing and making the crown of the hat.
Okay.
You use that in order to make the top of the hat. So
okay.
you're good to go for quite a while.
Okay.
Now, I talked about this a little bit on my Monday episode that I'm just putting out today, but I'm taking a little bit of time off in March because the kids have March break and I'm hoping to spend some time with them. So I have to kind of slow down on the amount of videos that I'm putting out while they're on March break. So I'm going to spread the tutorials for the hat out a little bit. So it's going to take us a lot longer to get through the hat than it did for the dishcloth. So take your time. Okay?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. I think that was all I had for today. Did you have any other questions?
No.
Okay. So there's going to be a second part to your video today.
There is.
So I asked, I had someone ask me a question last week about describing the differences in yarn weights and types. And so I asked, since I happen to, one of my best friends is a yarn dyer, I asked her to answer some questions for Gerald. So my friend Adrienne did a little interview with Gerald, and so he's going to put that in his video. So
yep. So you'll see that shortly.
You'll see that shortly.
Okay.
All right. Well, that's it for me today, Gerald. Have a fun chat with Adrienne.
Will do.
And I'll see you later.
Okay.
Happy knitting.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, guys. I'm Gerald, Ginger Gerald Stitcher, and I'm here with Adrienne from Fibre Friends Podcast. You don't have your own. You're just on Fibre Friends, right?
Just on Fibre Friends, yep.
Because I know Caroline has another one, so.
Yeah.
And we're here for a masterclass on yarn weights, right? Yarn weights. Different types of yarns. Because, you know, I don't know anything about yarn. I don't know anything. So Caroline, of course, is friends with Adrienne and Louise, who have been graciously helping us with our yarn lessons or knitting lessons. I can't talk today. It's a Monday afternoon. Anyways. And so Adrienne is here to talk to us because she is the master dyer.
Sure, we'll go with that.
You want to tell us about your company real quick?
Sure. So I have a very small indie dyed yarn company called Old Oak Yarns. You can find me on Etsy. And I started dyeing about 1.5 years ago. And yeah, mostly just because I actually started out dyeing cross-stitch fabric years and years ago just for fun.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And then I became a knitter, and I still wanted to dye stuff because playing with color is fun. So I started to dye yarn.
Nice. I didn't know you were a cross-stitch dyer at first. So anyways, I will link below Old Oak Yarns. Oh, there goes Geo, sorry. So you can also find her on Ravelry.
Yeah.
As
TryllaCraft.
TryllaCraft. Again, it will be linked below, probably blinking on the screen here. And on Instagram, also as TryllaCraft, right?
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So today we are here to talk about different yarn weights, types, different yarns. So obviously we already know about Dishy I have Dishy here because I started a new washcloth today. And it's a 100% cotton yarn.
Right.
Because it has to be washable and like durable.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know that much. And other stuff is not washable and durable.
Well, that's not true.
Well, see, that's why you're here, because that's how much I know. Okay, so what do you mean by weighing? Start over again. What do you mean by yarn weights?
So yarn weight actually doesn't talk about how much something actually weighs, but about how thick the yarn is. Another way to measure yarn thickness is called wraps per inch. So how many times you can wrap it around something and it fits in an inch. But that's usually a spinner kind of thing when they're trying to figure out how, when they've hand spun yarn, how thick it is and what weight it is. Really, we just need to know the different names for the weights, and that'll tell us enough about it.
So, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but in a lot of ways, if you're a cross-stitcher, because many of the people watching this are cross-stitchers,
right?
It's very similar to like the count of fabric is how many squares per inch. This is like how many wraps per inch.
Right.
To give you the weight.
Another way you can think about it is in the different types of floss that you could use. So DMC is probably similar to either lace or fingering weight. Then you have like pearl cotton 5, pearl cotton 8, pearl cotton 12, right? You have all the different weights.
Sure.
And those numbers. So the same type of idea applies to yarn.
Okay.
So if you start with the thinnest or lightest yarn, it's hard to tell. This is lace weight. So it's really quite thin. Let me see if I can pull out a strand over my finger. It's really, really quite skinny. Now, if you put sock weight beside it, which is really a very common weight of yarn, because that's usually what we knit socks out of. People do a lot of shawls, a lot of indie dyed yarns start with this fingering weight. There we go. So if you look at the yarns, they're just slightly heavier. Not a huge difference at all.
Yeah, I can barely tell.
Yeah, it's very, very slight. From there, you'd move on to sport weight, which I don't happen to have any of. But the next one after that would be DK weight, or double knitting weight. And here you can start to see a bit of a difference. It's a little bit thicker.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? After that, you'd move on to worsted weight yarn. And you can see again, slightly thicker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Finally, you'd go on to either a bulky or chunky weight yarn. And this one, noticeably thicker. So the really thin ones are hard to tell apart, but as you get thicker, it's really quite obvious. So you'd use different weights depending on what you want from the garment itself. So up here in Canada, middle of the winter, you're going to want probably either a worsted weight or a bulky weight hat. Really good for those big chunky sweaters. Things like socks. In the summertime, you're going to want lighter weight yarns, so they get thinner fabric, thinner material.
Makes sense, yeah. And I was just going to say, I'm much like Louise. I hate the words, and I hate the word chunky when it comes to calling everything
really?
chunky.
Chunky or bulky, really?
Yes.
And yeah, but they're good. For newer knitters, they tend to really like the heavier weights because you can knit faster, right? If you're doing a hat in worsted weight, you'll need less stitches than if you were doing a hat in fingering weight.
No, because it takes up more space.
Right, exactly. So you'll knit a hat faster if it's worsted. But on a bulky or a chunky, whoop, that one's going to go super quick.
Okay.
So you're currently used to using a worsted weight because that's what your cotton is. your cotton is a worsted weight cotton. And
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh. I didn't realize that was worsted weight because it's much thinner than what I was using for my practice worsted weight. Okay.
Yeah. There's a range. Like, it's not a super
Sure.
specific.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, they're it really depends what you want to make, and that'll determine what size of yarn that you're going to choose. So it's totally possible to make socks out of worsted, but you're going to get thick, heavy, chunky socks.
Yeah, like boot socks or...
Exactly. If you want something a little bit more delicate, funky socks to wear in your dress shoes, then you're going to want a fingering weight yarn, so it's a nice thin material.
Cool.
Yeah.
So then, right now we're talking about we're talking about the weight. So that doesn't mean what it's actually made up of, because obviously the dishi is 100% cotton. So I guess does what it's made up of affect the weight? Does that make sense? Am I asking it the right way?
I know what you're asking. It won't change the thickness, because the thickness doesn't really, that's what determines what weight we call
what weight it's classified as.
Right. What it's actually made of, the content of the yarn will influence how much yardage you get in a certain amount of physical weight. So 100 grams, so this is a 100 gram skein of worsted, it's 218 yards. This is 100 grams of fingering weight, this is 463 yards, right? This has cashmere in it, 100 grams fingering weight, but it's only 435 yards. So the content of it will change the yardage of it as well.
Okay.
Some aspects of it are heavier or lighter when you're talking about physical weight as opposed to yarn thickness weight.
And then, yes, it does. So, yeah, because obviously the different types of fibers would weigh differently. Therefore, you get different amounts of final product.
Right.
So then I guess the difference, different percentages would knit up differently.
A little bit. Yeah, they have different qualities to them.
Sure.
So, for example, this is an MCN, so it's a merino cashmere nylon blend. So it's got cashmere in it. So it's super soft. I wish you had Squish-O-Vision. It's so soft and squishy, way softer than either my worsted or my regular fingering, because the cashmere just makes it luxe and lovely. So because it's got nylon in it, it's really good for socks because the nylon gives it some strength.
Yeah.
So if you're making socks, you generally want a merino nylon, or at least a wool nylon blend. Doesn't necessarily have to be merino, but a wool nylon blend for socks. Throw in cashmere, that's absolutely great. But this type of yarn is also really good for stuff that's around the face and neck. So cowls, scarves, shawls would be lovely because it's such a soft, squishy, nice against the skin kind of yarn.
Okay.
All right. And there's lots of other things that could be in here. So not all wool is the same. These, actually all three of these, happen to be merino wool from the merino breed sheep. So it's a particularly soft wool. There's lots of other breeds out there. I only know a handful of them. Common ones that you'll see would be just plain, it'll just say wool, and it won't actually tell you where it's from. That tends to be a little bit more rustic, a tiny bit rougher and scratchier, but there's lots of people out there that really like that rustic feel. There's BFL, which is Blue Face Leicester. It's another breed of sheep. Really good for socks. It's really strong, so that works really well for socks. So there's not a huge, there's a difference in the wools, mostly in feel for us as beginning knitters. When you become a spinner, then there's a whole other stuff to learn about the wool that makes it different. But for our purposes, it's about a squish factor, really.
Again, another word I hate.
What, squish factor?
Yeah, squishy and or chunky. It's like, ugh.
Oh, you're not gonna like any of the terms in knitting. But there's lots of other things out there. For example, in our previous discussion, you had asked me a little bit about stellina. So this is a stellina.
Oh, okay.
It sparkles. So this is a silver stellina, and you had asked me about a gold stellina.
Mm-hmm.
Sparkles versus silver sparkles. So this particular yarn is 75% superwash merino, 20% nylon, 5% stellina. So technically I could use this for socks because of the nylon. I don't think I'd put this on my feet particularly, but I could. It would work just fine.
Yeah.
So the stellina is really just about the sparkles.
Okay. Cool.
I know, it's lovely. But there's lots of other things out there. This one is actually a silk blend. So it's got a little bit more shine to it, but not like stellina sparkly shine. If you'll also notice, if you look really closely, this is called a single ply. So normally yarn is multiple plies of yarn that are twisted together to give it some strength. This is really just a single strand. And these are actually really easy to pull apart, or easier to pull apart. But it's just, some people like single strand or single ply. I'm not really a big fan of it, but that's just me. There's lots of other stuff.
I would assume that the single ply wouldn't have as much give as maybe a, you know how like sometimes the wool is more.
I'm not really sure about that, but it's not nearly as strong.
Okay.
The ply give it strength, whereas a single ply, if you give it, it'll just pop apart.
Okay.
Don't tug really, really hard on single ply. And there's lots of other stuff that can be in your wool. So this is some kidlace mohair kidlace silk. So it's lace weight, so it's super, super fine. But you'll notice it's got a halo to it, and that's the fuzz that goes around it. So that's mohair. There's also alpaca. So this is some bulky alpaca, nice and thick. But again, if you look really closely, it's got a fuzz to it. Yeah. Yeah. This is baby alpaca. Super, super soft. Super, super soft. Warmer than wool, actually. It's wonderful, wonderful stuff. But again, a little on the pricier side.
Sure.
The more exotic the content, the pricier the yarn. And there's lots of other stuff that you can get inside that. There's yak and tencel, bamboo, quivet, angora, you name it. If it's a natural fiber, it can get stuffed into yarn of some type. I've even heard of dog hair yarn. Not my dog, thankfully.
Yeah.
But it's possible. So there's lots of different stuff in there. And it all changes the way it feels, often the drape of something, so how it lays when you knit it. But it really depends. I tend to buy a lot of those specialty fibers just because it sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Not because it's actually going to change what I'm going to knit with it.
Okay. And I guess really you're not going to know what you like until you try it.
Exactly true. Yeah.
So I guess my last question I have for you is, you know, in the cross stitch world, you can't really wash, some you can, but you can't really wash a lot of hand-dyed or over-dyed because they bleed or whatever. But obviously with yarn or whenever you're knitting, you have to be able to block your projects. And in order to do that, don't you have to get it wet? So can you wash your projects?
You can. Absolutely. So most indie dyed yarns, for example, the yarn that I dye, if done properly, it should be color fast. There might be a tiny, tiny little bit of bleeding the very first time you wash it, but there really should be next to none. people that aren't professional dyers don't use professional grade dyes, then that's where it gets a little dicey. A lot of the one-off natural home dyers, unless you go to the necessary lengths to make it color fast and to have the right mordants and fixants in it, it could bleed. But if you're buying from like a proper yarn dyer, whether it's on Etsy or a more commercial one, they really should be color fast.
Okay. So that makes me wonder, why can yarn dyers get it color fast, but is it something in the yarn versus the fibers across the,
Yeah, it is actually. You have to use a different type of dye. So for natural fibers, or protein fibers, animal fibers, wool, yak, alpaca, silk, angora, cashmere, all of those, you need to use what's called acid dyes. Whereas with cottons, linens, things like that, the plant-based fibers, you need to use fiber reactive dyes. So it's just a different type of dye, and so you can have different issues. Theoretically, you should be able to make them mostly color fast, but there's usually no absolute guarantee when it comes to color sometimes. And some colors are harder to get color fast than others.
Well, yeah, because the reds often will bleed first before others, is what I'm told. Right?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Oh, I said reds will often bleed first before anything else, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, reds, some blues, turquoises can sometimes be really hard. But yeah, reds are usually the worst.
Yeah, cool. So I don't have any other questions. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I think we've covered quite a bit today.
Cool. Yeah, I think so too. So if you have any other questions for Adrienne, leave some comments below or message us. You can shoot her a message on Ravelry. Not that I know how to do that yet. But maybe if we have enough questions, we can get her back onto the channel for another masterclass.
Sure. Sounds great. I'd be happy.
That would be awesome. So again, we want to thank Adrienne for coming on. If you have any other questions about yarn, she has Old Oak yarns. Go check that out. She has an awesome mustard yellow color. I've already favorited it. So anyways, thanks for watching. Happy knitting. I was going to say stitching, but this is about stitching today. So, and we'll see you next time. Bye.